Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. It is a late Tuesday night stream. I am going to be covering the Wednesday slate of games. And going forward for the rest of the season, we'll be adding some shows, of course. And as we get closer to March and the tournament, we'll be going to daily like we do. But for the next, approximately month, 5-6 weeks or so, we'll be doing shows on Monday night, Tuesday night, and Friday night. So 3 different times during the week, you'll have my face on your screen talking about some college hoops. And we're starting to hit a nice rhythm. Before I get into the slate here and start talking, I want to first mention how today's slate went from last night's show. We had a winner chicken dinner in the $250 Mania Q. Our guy Mike Kutry comfortably wins with a 244.5 to get the FTN's first seat in the Mania. Really nice lineup that he had. He was able to get, a nice second half from Marcus Saucer. He played Matty Cleveland like myself, and Jalen Wilson played the 3 pay-up lineup that really crushed. He had, Abram, Corin, Ross as his main values, played Juwan Roberts, which was great. And then, of course, fell for Davon Smith like myself. So a really nice build for him. Glad that he got in. Another solid evening for me. I did not win the $60 Mania Q that I was in, but definitely felt good about my build and had a really solid evening, and we're starting to hit our groove. The build that I ran with, I played Sasser and Roberts too. You guys know I was into the Houston mini stack there. Matthew Cleveland, of course. Armando Bacot was who I ran over Wilson. Bacot had a great game, but Wilson, of course, for cheaper, ended up beating him because of the overtime. Fell for Davon Smith. Will not be playing a Passner player again. Smith was super chalky. Wasn't that bad, but inexplicably just gets yanked. And how many times do I tell you guys that Passner, he ends up just doing some really puzzling things, very much so all the time. I tell the trash can Burrell story often, and then I end up playing Smith. I will not be using another Georgia Tech player in a main build for the rest of the season because Passner is on one, and he's just not going to be trustworthy. So that didn't work out too well. The 3 values that I ended up using were a little bit different, I think, than the rest of the field. Did go with Ernest Ross of NC State. Really good game for him, 19.5 fantasy points. I think he would have hit 30 if he didn't get foul trouble, but really solid performance. And, of course, you guys know I was heavy on Marcus Hammond. Just a big believer in him. Only 4-2. I went over it last night. The minutes are on the uptick. 19 points, hit 5 triples, 27.5 fantasy points. Beats Jalen Worley, who was a little more popular of value play for Florida State, by 1.5 fantasy points. Should have ended up playing both of them. But Hammond was a really nice play, and I'm very proud of that one working out. And then I stupidly played Javon Quinterly instead of Jaden Bradley. Talked about Jaden Bradley at length last night. Talked a little bit about Quinterly, but you just can't use him. No matter how cheap he is, there's just no trusting Javon Quinterly. He's not the same guy. But a really good lineup. I hit 235.5. Very happy with the way things went. Very happy with DFS. Props went well. Bets went well. We had a good evening all around. Across the board, and I'm very happy to report that we're going to be hitting a rhythm here now that we have the first seat under our belts. FTN is going to be getting many, and we're going to definitely be having a good rest of the season going forward. And then NFL money's coming in, so how could we not, right? The NFL CFB is over, NFL is winding down, NBA's in that grind portion of their season, and we just have people who are getting interested in CF or CBB. as March gets closer, people are just really going to be coming over and looking to spend money, on the tournament, but trying out DFS and seeing how it works for them. I actually like this Wednesday slate a little better than the slate that I liked today, so I'm feeling pretty confident, pretty comfortable, pretty excited with that. We are going to go game by game. Tomorrow's article will be more of a top plays type of thing. I'm still dealing with a lot of busyness at work, but I'm excited. I think we're going to do well. Let's dive in. Before we do that, I do want to plug the FTN site, ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com. You want to definitely be a member of these sites. You can use code DUB, that's Dub, for an additional 20% off. That is included for monthly. So if you want to pay that monthly amount, and make that as part of your routine, get that 20% off every month, or you can pay for annual. You want to pay it all at once, don't want to deal with worrying about it, you get that discount off the bulk amount as well. Not only does that get you access to the collegiate content that I provide, but all of the pro sports, all of the sports that we offer in general, from esports to NFL to NBA, NHL, of course, collegiate sports, WNBA, which is going to be coming up here in a few months. You already see me posting on Twitter about some of the player transactions that are happening. I'm a big grinder of WNBA in the summer. It's actually a very profitable sport, so I do hope that you guys, when the CBB season ends, stick around and hang out with me on the WNBA circuit, because it is a lot of fun. And, of course, TBT. In the summer, I like to provide a little bit about that. You get access to every single show. Some of them are behind the the paywall. Some are in front, like myself. But there's all that content. Not only do you get that, you get the trackers. That's when we're making different plays, picks, exposures. Wanted to know who we're going to play, what our player pool is. Every single article that is available, strategy-wise, top plays articles, all of that good stuff. And of course, the Discord. I say it all the time, but the Discord access really is the cream of the crop when it comes to any kind of content, because you get the access to that when we post starting lineups, late breaking news, potential scratches. How often are we able to get out in front of a news, post that there's somebody who's out with 5 minutes to go? That player ends up still being 15 to 20% owned, and then you've got a good chunk of the field with a bagel. Happened so much in college football. It was just such a big edge to have. It definitely happens in college basketball as well. You can use that code over at ftnbets.com as well. The PrizePicks tracker and the betting tracker is accessible. The PrizePicks tracker is actually, I believe, for free right now. So you can see our picks there on the prop market for free and see how we do. If you're kind of, on the fence about joining us, definitely check that out. And if you like what you see, come on and join us. Hang out with us in Discord. Make lots of money. We still have a month and a half to 2 months of college basketball, and we're hitting our rhythm right now. So it's going to be a big money-making venture for you if you haven't grinded college basketball before. Appreciate you guys continuing to check out the show. Make sure you hit the like button there. Drop a comment in the live chat, or if you're watching on demand, make sure you drop a comment there. It really helps our exposure. And I like to circle back around and answer those questions live on the show, as well as check out the comments that are posted and answer those questions as well. All right, all that's out of the way. Let's get into the slate. We have a nice 12-gamer. They have given us the night slate of games too. So instead of breaking it up a little bit like they did today, we're going to be going right into the 7 o'clock hour on PST time zone there. So it starts at 3:30 PST till 7. Means we'll be grinding into the 9 to 10 o'clock hour for college basketball. And it ends with the hammer game, which is Oregon versus Cal, which has the potential to be very fantasy friendly or very, very disappointing. All right, first game on the slate, let's talk UConn versus Seton Hall. Now, UConn, when they started out, they were just totally unstoppable team. There's talk of, this is a Final Four caliber squad. They are just completely unstoppable. They have so many good wins, over Florida, Iowa State, Alabama, Oregon, Oklahoma State, a convincing win over Butler once Big East play started, convincing win over Georgetown, a pretty solid win over Villanova. And then all of a sudden, last 5 games, they have had the wheels fall off. Losses at, Xavier, losses at Providence, losses at Marquette, home loss to St. John's, which is shocking, and it was a double-digit loss. That's really the wheels falling off. I love St. John's, of course, but to beat UConn on their floor, that's really something. And they do have a home win over Creighton wedged in there. Now going on the road against a very tough Seton Hall squad, this is going to be a very difficult game, but one in which they must win. There's still a lot of basketball left to be played, but they can't continue this slide. And a loss here on the road to Seton Hall is just going to be completely dreadful if it happens. As far as DFS plays go, I would say that there is a DVP to look at. As good as Seton Hall is defensively, as deep as the rotation sometimes is, and Shaheen Holloway is able to play this aggressive style and throw multiple bodies at you, they have sprung a leak when it comes to front court or bigs, if you will. So it does mean this is an opportunity where we could see, Adime Samogo play really well. Donovan Clingan, who I know got into some big foul trouble last time out there and has had some really nice games this year, but that's always going to be a risk with him. Alex Caravan. So there is some players to like here on the UConn side when it comes to DFS purposes. Sanogo is currently 10th on the Ken Palm Player of the Year rankings, has a 30.8% shot rate, a 27% usage rate, a block rate of almost 3%, and a 30% combined rebounding rate. He's also shooting 38% from long range on 29 attempts. I don't know if you realize that, but Mans has taken threes this year, is not something he did last year. Clearly angling for a position in the NBA. As a big man, you got to be able to hit threes once in a while. He is a bit undersized for a 5 anyways, like 6'8". They list him at, I think, 6'9", 6'10", but it seems like he's really 6'8" when you really delve in there. So he's trying to add that element to his game. Now, Sanogo hasn't been the most consistent player, but the price point here of low 8K is definitely interesting to a degree for me. I think that he's very much in play. The road spot kind of makes me nervous because obviously fouls on the road are something that could potentially happen. He does have a fouls called rate of 4.2 per 40, which is down from his freshman season of 6.7, but that's just something that we have to consider with him. The last few games on the road haven't been so great. You look at his last 2 home games against St. John's and Creighton, he has scored 33 plus fantasy points. However, his last 3 road games, he has failed to register over 27 fantasy points, which includes just an awful game against Marquette in which he only scored 15, had 5 turnovers, wasn't in foul trouble, just wasn't playing well. And that was a game in which Donovan Clingan really went off in that good DVP spot against Marquette. So I'm a little on the fence about using Sanogo for a main lineup here, but I do think he's a good play on paper. For GPP, Donovan Clingan is just a total stud. No one's going to use him. Now, coming off the Marquette game, in which he only scored 50, I liked kind of going back to him. He was a GBP play all the way for me. I had very little exposure, but threw him out in 1 or 2, and he just ended up getting in foul trouble. But you see, he almost scored, 8 fantasy points in the 8 minutes that he played. High caliber player, very high fantasy point per minute player. He just has an inability to stay out of foul trouble. Very raw when it comes to his discipline there. He's a young player, 7'2", 270 freshman, still has some growing up to do, but look at his rates already. 24% usage rate, 24% shot rate. He has an offensive rebounding rate of 17.5% and a defensive rebounding rate of 34.5%, a block rate of 15.4%, and a steal rate of 2.5%. However, you stare at it and you see 6.1 fouls per 40. That means he has trouble staying on the floor. He is drawing 6 fouls per 40, though, so he has a knack for just getting it in the paint and going at whoever's trying to guard him. So I like Donovan Clingan. I'd like to see him cheaper before we really consider him, but if Sanogo struggles out the gate or gets in early foul trouble, look out for Clingan here. I think he could have a really big game. And if you don't think he can produce here against a team like Seton Hall, look back at Providence, who has a tough defense as well. In 21 minutes at Providence, he had 12 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks, 36.5 fantasy points, and then a string of foul trouble. But you look at it, if he doesn't get into foul trouble, it's crazy. It's not a situation where he's going to kind of coast in and score 20. He's going to get 11 or he's going to get 40. And you look back and you see some of these performances: LIU 42, against Florida 35, Oklahoma State 4, Alabama, under 15. Oregon, he had 34, a string of 24, 25, 32s. against lower tier competition at the beginning of the season. So I don't know. I just really like Klingon, and I want to mention that he's somebody I have my eye on. Not a main team play, but definitely going to be a solid option. You do have Alex Caravan there at 5'8". If you want to take advantage of this DVP and you don't want to pay up for Snogo and you don't trust Klingon, and Caravan's fine, especially considering the fact that he's played 29 plus minutes in the last 4 games, has hit 18 plus fantasy points in 3 of those 4, which includes the Marquette game where he really took advantage of that, that soft matchup, 17-7. And then he had a nice game against St. John's in the loss, played 37 minutes. He's taken 22 shots in his past 2 games. I think Caravan at 5'8" is maybe a little bit more of a sneakier option with a higher floor, and then people are, again, going to be ignoring him for the most part. He does have a very high offensive rating, one of the best on the teams. Usage and shot rate are fluctuating right now because there is so many mouths to feed on this team. But he does shoot 36% from long range, so the freshman has the ability to step out and hit threes, has the ability to get down low and bang, attack the glass, do a little bit of everything. So I'm a fan of his as well. I like what Hurley has done here with his freshman class, the front court especially. But you're going to have to just be careful with them on the road. Then you have Jordan Hawkins at 7'1", who's just an absolute monster. Disappointed myself for not using him at St. John's because that was the perfect spot to do so. I used Jordan Hawkins a lot in the beginning of the season when his price was sitting there at 5.7, 6K. Now we're getting him at this low 7K range after he almost got to 8K. He's definitely in play, going to take a bunch of shots. However, the Seton Hall DVP says to use bigs. Like I said, the perimeter play of their opponents, it's a little tougher because their guards do defend quite well. Turnovers could be an issue, and just the fact that they're on the road, I think that Hawkins is a little bit more of a luxury play instead of a priority play, which means I'm not really looking there because I think this is kind of a tough spot for him. You do have Andre Jackson there at 7'2", just above, more peripheral oriented, does score from time to time, but price-wise is kind of a little bit higher there. Tristan Newton had a very good non-con, performance before Big East play. You'd think with Big East being so fast-paced, poor defense at times, or fantasy-friendly, that he would play really well. But this does tend to be a deeper UConn team on the wing and the perimeter, and it's really hurt him. Earlier in the season, he was a fantastic play, put up some pretty big scores, but you're seeing some inconsistency for him, and the shots just aren't there as much. And since he's not a big peripherals guy, when those shots disappear, it just becomes a complete non-factor. Then you have some potential value here. Joey Calcaterra, 3'4". He's playing, 15-ish minutes. Desperation value. Hassan Diarra, whose minutes hit 20 against St. John's, typically right around that 15-minute mark as well, almost min price. As we go through, we'll identify some other values, but you could definitely look there if you need to. On the Seton Hall side, Kadari Richmond has been pretty chalky the last, maybe month or so. He's just a guy that I can't do it. Mike was on the show a couple weeks ago when Seton Hall was on there, and we both said he makes us uncomfortable. The matchups he's been having lately are great. You see, against St. John's, he had 48. Against Georgetown, 31. DePaul, it made sense to use him. I didn't go there. I ended up going, I believe that was Saturday, right, with the Tulane guys, and thank God for that. But 32 minutes, he's just shot poorly. 3 for 11, still had the volume there. Three fouls, 4 turnovers, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 8 points. So still an okay game overall. You just didn't shoot the ball well. And the fact that, he scored only 4 points the game before that and hit 31 really shows you how solid he is in other categories, such as assists, rebounds, steals, things of that nature. So he's definitely an okay play. He's just one that I don't feel that comfortable using, and I don't think I feel that comfortable using him against UConn. Even though UConn started to struggle, they're still a top 15 defense, when it comes to efficiency. Seton Hall is a top 20 defensive unit as far as efficiency goes, so this is looking more like a rock fight than I want to get too involved in. But Richmond is definitely an industry guy. I can say that. He's not really a Walt guy, but he's an industry guy. Does have a 24% usage rate, 41% from long range, but only 24 attempts. Looking at the last Seton Hall game, we can kind of delve into that a little bit. DePaul really pushed them. It looked like they were gonna lose that. But Alamir Dawes, 15-2. He shot the ball pretty decently from long range. Casey and Defo had a big game, 16-12. Tyrese Samuel, 12-2. Tate Davis barely played. Femi Odekale off the bench, 12-5. And then you had Dre Davis and Jameer Harris. Little factors, but playing 16 to 20 minutes off the bench. Trey Jackson hardly played. So they're about 9 to 10 deep right now, as it is. This really, the prices on these guys, we're not getting much discounts. Casey and Defo capable of putting up those 40s in the right matchup, but this isn't the right matchup with that UConn front court, so I don't have a lot of interest there. Tyrese Samuel is a guy who can get early foul trouble, has a lot of upside, but we're not, again, getting a very good discount at 6'3". Dre Davis actually has one of the highest usage rates on the Seton Hall team coming over from Louisville. Sitting there at 24%. He's a guy who's had some up and down performances in the non-con, but in Big East play, he just hasn't been playing enough minutes to be a factor, but he's playing enough minutes to take away from other guys where it takes the top off their actual upside. I could maybe see playing Alamir Dawes at 5'6" because it is a decent price for him. Has scored 25 plus in the last 3 of the last 5 games. But I just think that we could do better. There's some other games here. Pitt, Louisville, of course, Ohio State, Nebraska, Auburn, LSU, just much better fantasy environments. Hell, Xavier, DePaul, we might have to end up fully stacking that game. Don't want to get too involved with this first one here, Seton Hall, UConn. So we will move on. Texas A&M and Florida. Not another game that just, kind of reeks of agony and tilt and losing money. I don't want to get too involved with these Florida values. It's just become a situation where they are very untrustworthy. The price remains super cheap. Kyle Lofton is still under 5K at 4.9. We want to get St. Bonaventure. Osuni had a nice game tonight, by the way. Feel like we're talking about St. Bonaventure guys all the time. They're everywhere. Lofton's price at 4.9 certainly continues to put him in play because we know he's going to play over 30 minutes. He's just not himself. It does the system, whatever, or the group around him. He's just not looking like the version of himself that we know he can be. And he's not looking to be aggressive. When St. Bonaventure needed a bucket or they ran into some, lulls where they just were scoring droughts or whatever, he could take over a game. And he really just hasn't done that this season. We haven't seen it. We did see it early in the year against FAU. I remember that game vividly. We sort of saw it against West Virginia, and it really hasn't happened since. Had an okay game against Ohio, had a decent game against Georgia, but at 4.9, I think that we're going to have to start, considering him more of an alt team play and not a main team guy. And I know that probably pains Kutri to hear, but Mike's just, one of his guys is Lofton, and sometimes we have our guys who just aren't that good right now. I can definitely still get behind Quasi Reeves, even though he only played 11 minutes in the last game. Off the bench, he's typically been pretty solid, guy that you can count on to score 15, 20 fantasy points. So I do like him, even though we saw him just play that 11 minutes against Missouri. Look for him to see his minutes, kind of push back towards that 20. We have seen Miriam Jones minutes spike up quite a bit. He's sitting there at 4.3. We know he was a factor at Penn State. We know his first season with Florida, he was a factor. To start this year with Lofton and the emergence of Reeves, the minutes really kind of just evaporated for him, but he has played 27 plus minutes in 4 of his last 5, 30 plus in his last 2, and he's taking a lot more shots. He does take a ton of threes, kind of like Noah Locke in that regard. And has 20 plus fantasy points in 3 straight. So might we be able to consider Myron Jones at this point? I think we definitely can. Texas A&M isn't a great matchup, but they're also not a team that we need to look to avoid. Their games tend to be pretty sloppy. But I think that Jones, if we're going to continue to see those kind of minutes, he's absolutely has to be considered in play, and he becomes a priority play over the likes of Kyle Lofton and over the likes of Quasi Reeves. Now, Trey Bonham is sitting at 4.8, which is a very intriguing price for him. We saw Early on in the season, he exploded against FSU, Oregon State, Xavier, some of these just really big games he had, which caused his price to go from, mid 3K up to 6K at one point. Now he started to hit a real wall. Last time they played Texas A&M, he did cook them 21-4-4. He had 7 turnovers in that game, though. Not great. Did have 30 fantasy points. And then the wheels have fallen off against Georgia, LSU, and Missouri. He's played less than 15 minutes in each. He has really lacked shot ability. He's lacked defense. He's been getting cooked on defense, which is why a lot of his minutes are gone. I have watched that LSU game pretty much the whole entire way through, and I watched that Missouri game, and he just did not give very much effort, and Jones' accelerated play has caused him to just bottom down. But it is interesting to see he's 4.8, and all these Florida guys outside of Castleton are so cheap. Every slate, it's like I feel like I can use them. Guys like Lofton shouldn't be this cheap. Guys like Bonham, Alex Fudge, who's my guy. We each have our Florida guy between Mike and I. Hasn't played great since the Ohio game, and it's tough, but he still has so much upside. We've been seeing him continuously play 20-plus minutes, so the playing time is still there for him. He does try to make the highlight play often. He reaches a lot. He's just very hyperactive, a good athlete, a lot of upside, still raw, and we're seeing some foul issues for him. I think at 4.6, he is a great tournament play. I think most of the Florida cheapies are. I just wonder what the industry is going to do with guys like Lofton and Reeves, who have kind of been letting them down. But Fudge is just a really good athlete that's capable of blocking shots, getting steals, has a usage rate approaching 20%, has a shot rate approaching 20%. So I'm not ready to quite give up on him just yet. I love that price for him. I just don't know that we can really use him in a main team responsibly. 21 minutes last time out against Texas A&M, though, so the PT will be there. Will Richards sitting there at 5.1. The minutes have remained for him. He has 20-plus fantasy points in 4 straight, so I do think he's probably, because of the combination of how well he's playing right now, the playing time, the consistency, he's scoring, probably the best, point per dollar play on Florida, and considering all those other factors. And then, of course, you have Colin Castleton, if you can get up there to the 10K. Had a 50 last time out against Missouri, 38, 42 against Georgia, 30 against Texas A&M. He went through a little bit of a lull in December where he was hitting, low 30s, upper 20s, not taking a ton of shots. It seemed like, there was just disconnect with the offense, and it seems like they've regrouped, they've reset their priorities, and they're getting Colin Castleton the ball, and he's just doing some really good things. His stat line against Missouri was amazing. 16 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, which you don't see that too often from him, but he's definitely getting his assist number up. 2 blocks, 3 steals, 7-11 from the field, only 2 of 6 from the foul line. Been getting himself to the foul line a lot lately. I do like the paying 10K for him. I think it's fine with the available value that we're going to find on this slate. I think Colin Castleton has to be considered. It was a 66-63 home loss to Texas A&M last time out. That was the game, of course, like I said, Trey Bonham had 21. So if we see the starting lineup remain Fudge, Richard, Lofton, Bonham, Castleton, we'll have some decisions to make. On the Aggie side, the starting lineup that they rolled was Tyrese Bradford, Julius Marble, Wade Taylor, Dexter Dennis, and Henry Coleman. And then, of course, off the bench, we've got Anderson Garcia, Andre Gordon, my man Manny Obasake, Solomon Washington, and Hayden Hefner. So the Aggies, I'm just never a fan of them when it comes to DFS. They have been nearly a universal avoid this season for me. They do have intriguing pieces, guys like Dexter Dennis, guys like Manny. Wade Taylor's busted out this season, but he's priced, up in the 7 to 8K range more often than not. So it's really hard to kind of pay that tag because, he can disappear at any time. Tyrese Radford has never been a high upside guy. Sitting there looking at him at 7.5 feels like a big no for me. So I'm not looking at really anyone from the Aggies team. My man Manny is dealing with a hand injury, so he's out for at least a month. So that's one of their more talented guys, even though he's still pretty raw, that's out. And there's going to be some definite minutes absorption from other guys. Maybe somebody like Kalen Robinson, who sits there at near min price. He did play 10 minutes in a blowout win over South Carolina and looked pretty good. Maybe he could see, some additional playing time from that. Looking at the last competitive game they had, let's pull up here, LSU, and they've been kind of blowing the doors off of opponents here lately. Big win over Missouri, just a big win over South Carolina, 13-point win over LSU. So they're winning games. So I guess I have to respect them as a team and the job Buzz Williams done with them. But for DFS purposes, they're just, they don't move the needle for me. The last competitive game they had was against LSU. We saw Wade Taylor, Henry Coleman, Tyrese Radford, and Julius Marble all play 30-plus minutes, and Dexter Dennis played 28. Only 2 guys off the bench saw more than 11 minutes, Andre Gordon and Anderson Garcia. So we are looking at, in a close game, a smaller rotation. Just lacks the consistency there. Rates wise, the top usage rate on the team is Wade Taylor, 28%, shooting 39% from long range. Tyrese Radford, 22% usage rate. Henry Coleman, 20%. Julius Marble, 21.5%. You can definitely use some of these Aggies guys, but I wouldn't recommend stacking them at all, and I would highly recommend maybe keeping them even to GPP/alt builds, because you're really going to be gritting your teeth and feeling some tilt if you try to use any of them in your main build. Wade Taylor might look okay at 7.3 to some of you, but I would just advise you to look elsewhere. All right, Auburn versus LSU. This is definitely a more fantasy-friendly game. The chat has a message. Let's see. My man Saw back in the chat watching the show, 2 shows in a row. Saw goes way back with Saw. He's used to call in when we did blog talk. So really sharp young man there, and an excellent bowler. And he mows a mean lawn too. 21-22 value cringe. Back to Myron Jones. Been running the point and making threes. Aggies seal off the paint. Make you shoot threes. Can't believe I'm using him. Yeah, man. Florida values are the tilt. All right, so Auburn versus LSU. I, of course, am a huge Auburn fan and have been for quite some time. When they made that, that run to the Final Four, that was a fun one. I like Bruce Pearl. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I like the way he plays. I like the way he runs his offense, and I like the personnel he typically brings in. And my man, Jay Broome, has been fantastic this season, moving up to the P5. There hasn't been any real drop-off in production. In fact, he's played even better. But fouls have been an issue for him in SEC play. He's been able to overcome them most of the time. Against Mississippi State in a game that they won, he couldn't overcome them. Only was able to play 25 minutes, had 4 fouls, 2 early in the first half, less than 20 fantasy points, which was only the 3rd time this season he's been under 20, or actually make it 4th. He has been really good in SEC play. 36 against Florida, 41 against Georgia, 40 against Arkansas, 43 against Ole Miss. He dropped the hammer on my UW boys, 38. So it's really consistent. I love what this matchup brings here with Broome versus KJ Williams, 2 studs at the low to mid-major level the last couple of years. Now they're going at each other in the SEC. It's going to be a lot of fun. You definitely are going to pay for them, though, as Broome is 9-2. And KJ has been, up over 9K most of the season. He's sitting there at 9.5. And he also had a foul game last time out against Alabama. So coming at it and going back at each other, I think we're going to see both of them play extremely well. If I had to choose between the 2, it's Broome for me, and a lot of that has to do with my biases. Yes, I am a very biased guy towards my guys, but I just like Broome. I think he performs at a more consistent level than KJ, and I'm not afraid to use Auburn guys on the road like I would be some of the other teams. As far as usage and efficiency and all that stuff, Broome has a 27.5% usage rate, 29.5% shot rate, combined rebounding rate well over 35%, a block rate of 10.5%, a steal rate of 2.5%, draws 4.4 fouls per 40, does get called 4.7 fouls per 40. So it's going to be a race to see between Broome and Williams who gets into foul trouble first. We did see, with him struggling, a nice game out of Wendell Green. Auburn's pretty deep at guard spots, so Wendell Green kind of, early on in the SEC season was ordinary, but the last 3 he's really looked good. Somebody to definitely consider at that 7.4 price point. Green's usage rate is the highest on the team at 29.5%. Has a shot rate of 26%. He's also a very good passer, sets up Broom and other guys like Jalen Williams, who's having a pretty nice breakout season. Almost a assist rate of 30%, steal rate of 3.5%, draws almost 7 fouls per 40. It's only 5'11", but he's not afraid to attack the rim, kind of in the way Allen Iverson used to do. Not that I'm suggesting he's Allen Iverson, but he draws fouls in a similar fashion. Jalen Williams, like I said, it's kind of blossomed this season. He's waited patiently to take his turn, and now he has it. He has been able to perform pretty well. Earlier in the season, he was a lot cheaper and easier to kind of get behind and use. Now we're looking at 6.5. It's a little tougher. He was in the 7K range, so he's definitely back in play. He took advantage of the Broom foul trouble against Mississippi State, took 15 shots, had 36 fantasy points. Now, if you haven't been paying attention to Auburn, that might totally shock you, but he has had several performances this season where he scored 30-plus fantasy points. He definitely is capable. And if you want to play the angle where Broom is going to have all the defensive attention and they're going to work to get him in foul trouble, then it's going to fall again on Jalen Williams' shoulders to control the paint. And he's also a pretty decent three-point shooter, so he's really tough for opposing big men to guard because he can bring them out to the three-point line while also not being afraid to bang down low and control the paint. Maybe more of a GPP option, but 3K cheaper than Broom. Like I said, if you feel like fouls are going to be an issue, you can look to him. We have been seeing the Alan Flanagan, or as I affectionately like to call him, No Braids Flanny. He's returned. The prodigal son has returned. Dealing with injuries, playing out of position the last couple of seasons. He just hasn't looked like his early career self. He still had the minutes. Bruce Pearl, we know he's not like Pastner level with sitting guys or messing around with his rotation, but he's definitely a guy who can get frustrating with the way he does run these, hockey style rotations, which kind of messed over Flanagan a bit. But we've seen him play 30-plus minutes in 3 straight games. Veteran, has played these SEC teams, knows, how to not crumble in the moment, can step up and take shots, is just contributing at a very high level right now, has rattled off 24-plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. We're probably not going to get him at the low 4K price point anytime soon with the way he's playing. Love the spot for him against LSU. Want to continue going to him. But we've seen a trend here with value plays that have been smashing. They get into this mid-5 range. They become super, popular and chalky, and they just blow up and detonate the entire industry. And we've seen it time and time again. Obviously, it truly has nothing to do with what Flanagan's actually going to do, but I like to be a little superstitious and see these type of things and where we might be able to find some GPP edge or where we can zag when everyone else zigs. So I'm definitely cautious with my man Flanny. I've been enjoying the last 3 games because I have used him for the last 3. And I'll probably end up having, plenty of exposure. Will he be in my main lineup? Not too sure how that's going to, shake out just yet, but definitely have to consider him. I think the 5.5 price point is still really good for him as long as he gets to continue to play the rightful position and not have to play out of position where he's having to handle the rock, initiate the offense. Instead, he can be more of a creator for himself as opposed to the rest of the team. Katie Johnson remains cheap, but the minutes are not there on a consistent basis, and he's just not playable right now, even at the 4.3 price tag. It's sad. In the past, you would just lock him in at this price point and walk away and feel good about it, but right now you just can't use him until we start to see A, more minutes, or B, the 15 he is getting, he's actually more aggressive, getting some shots up, looking more efficient. I mean, he has a usage rate of 23%, a shot rate of 24.5%. So when he is on the floor, he's definitely looking to get shots, but lately he just hasn't seemed quite as interested. And I think he's probably in his head a little bit. Sometimes we forget these are, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and they do get affected by this stuff. So he's just not playable. You're looking really at Flanagan, Williams, Broom, and Green, I think. depending on, what you can afford and how your build shakes out. With Broom in that foul trouble last time, we did see a kind of, Williams obviously played a spike, but we saw a combination for the rest of the minutes. Dylan Cardwell played 15. They played Lear Bierman 13. And then the freshman who is just way too raw and can't get minutes right now, Johan Trearsal, only 6. Thought he'd be a bigger factor early on, but he hasn't been. The starting lineup we'll likely see is Green, Flanagan, Williams, Broom, and Zep Jasper, the eternal Zep Jasper, still flying around here in DFS circles and playing college basketball for a very long time. On the LSU side, it starts with KJ Williams, of course, leads the team in usage at 25%, in shot rate at 30%, has an offensive rebounding rate of 10%, shooting 46% from long range, which is top 75 in the country on 71 attempts, draws about 3.5 fouls per 40, and has very good stocks efficiency, block percentage of 3.1%, steal percentage of 2.7. The 46% from long range, he's always been a fairly decent 3-shooter at Murray State, like maybe low to mid 30s, right? He did have a season a couple of years ago in 2021 where he shot 42% on 63 attempts, but nothing like this 46% that he's currently shooting. So he's definitely added that element to his game, and obviously we know bigs have to be able to shoot threes in today's NBA if they want to make that next level. So I would assume he's going to continue to do that, and that's going to make it very difficult for Broom at times to keep up, even though he's pretty athletic and can step out to defend. The guard spot for LSU, it's a little less predictable, I think. We're seeing, Adam Miller kind of a hangover from his injury. He's definitely not looking like that same high upside player that we saw early on in his career when he was at Illinois. 5K would be a price, if it was prior to last year's injury. I would be thinking that we're locking and loading it, but I just don't know that we necessarily are, although this is a great spot against Auburn. The minutes are definitely there for him. He's playing right around 30, 31 minutes per game, and we're seeing, they're going to get a pretty nice boost with the way Auburn plays, but we're not seeing the, top 50 tempo rankings for Auburn that we're used to seeing this year. So I don't know that's going to necessarily turn into a track meet or anything, and that does give me a little bit of pause with Miller, even though that 5K price point is definitely appealing and certainly in play. We have seen Trey Hannibal take on some additional playing time recently and be in the starting lineup. Before our last game against Alabama, when they got totally shit kicked, he had 20-plus fantasy points in 4 straight games, which included 22-plus minutes. Sitting there at 5'8", assuming that the starting lineup will remain the same, which is Adam Miller, Derek Fountain, Justice Hill, KJ Williams, and Trey Hannibal. He's absolutely going to be considered in play because of the way he's been playing. He knows the system well, and I think that we can definitely look in his direction. Cam Hayes did play 20 minutes off the bench. Justice Williams, 20 minutes as well. Cam Hayes, of course, was starting earlier in the season, before missing the game against Florida and then came off the bench. We could very easily see that flip-flop and see Hayes go back in the starting lineup with Hannibal back to the bench. And if that's the case, I do change my opinion a little bit about Hannibal's main team viability. Now, Derek Fountain, let's talk about Derek Fountain. He sits there at 6'4". Last couple of games haven't been great. Fountain showed some real ability, some high upside during his time when he was at Texas A&M. Then Mississippi State. My brain dead there. Didn't play the same kind of minutes that he did late in the season as freshman year, and just kind of fell off a little bit and decided to transfer. And now that he has playing for LSU, he's able to play higher minutes. He's actually starting. He's in a system that can take advantage of his usage, his athleticism, his high upside. He's got pretty decent basketball IQ as well, and I really like his game. 6'4" might be a tough ask, but I definitely think if you're looking for some differentiation spots, or you're building 20-plus GPP lineups in the Jam, or you're looking for a very high leverage situation in the queue, Derek Fountain is one of those guys that can absolutely just destroy this matchup, especially if we think KJ Williams and Broom are going to neutralize each other or, get into fouls, however that's going to work out. A guy like Derek Fountain could really take over and end up with 10 plus rebounds and a ton of easy putbacks, and before you know it, putting up 30 plus at 2%. So I like Fountain a lot for that, but definitely, again, not a main team play. And it seems like a lot of the guys here in this game are going to be higher, GPP like plays, maybe not necessarily main team lineup guys. The rest of the guards, Justice Hill is just kind of a fade. He was really good last year. Cam Hayes, though, at 5K, assuming he would have jumped back in the starting lineup, I don't mind going to him as well. So we'll see how that shakes out. But obviously the premium plays Broom, Williams, and then possibly Adam Miller. All right, Ohio State versus Nebraska. This is definitely, now we're getting into the territory where it's like, yes, we're in main team stackability situations here. My man Bryce Sensabaugh is on the Malachi Branham plan, where he's getting way too good every single game, shows improvement. He's clearly going to be off to the NBA. Hopefully we can get some nil money to keep him together. Maybe we'll start a nil collective where we can give him some of, Rob's the Qdoba when he worked there. I think he still has a stockpile of free burrito coupons. Maybe we can get a nil collective of burrito coupons to keep Sensabaugh in college for one more season. For myself, your guys, and especially my dynasty team. But no, he's great. 30.4% usage rate, 33.5% shot rate, 19.1% defensive rebounding rate, not just a scorer like it might seem. Draws 5 fouls per 40 and shooting an astounding 46% from long range, which is top 60 in the country on 76 attempts. Now, they have thrown a little bit of a wrench in there. The last game against Rutgers, he didn't start. Clearly still going to play, but it's always nerve-wracking when a normal starter doesn't start, because sometimes there's an injury to be had, or sick, something like that, and it's not reported. So it is a little nerve-wracking. So I did not have Sensabaugh in my lineup against Rutgers, which I didn't love that matchup anyways, but I've been playing him a lot this season. I don't think there was a slate I faded him on before last slate since like January 1st, like the beginning of the month, like late December, early January. I used him against Purdue, Maryland, Minnesota, like just never fade the kid. But still a huge game off the bench against Rutgers. They did lose in overtime, but 20 points, 11 rebounds, an assist, a block, and a steal. The price, of course, is rising quite a bit because of his continued dominant performances that he's had, but I still like him a lot here at the 7.6 price point. Has a considerably much softer matchup against Nebraska than they just saw. We're seeing injuries galore for Ohio State. We're seeing Zed Key miss time. Bruce Thornton is now ailing. Justice Suing, there's always you're kind of treading lightly with him and his injury history. Isaac Lykiel missed time for personal reasons. They just haven't seemed to have their full squad together. And now we're looking at Bruce Thornton dealing with a wrist injury that could potentially knock him out of this game, and we could see some value because of it. But Sensabaugh is just a high usage guy. This Ohio State, looking at it from top to bottom, the roster's pretty weak overall. You take Sensabaugh out of this, and I don't know that they win very many games, honestly. But he's just going to continue to shoot, going to continue to score at a high level, and they're going to rely on him heavily. Continues to contribute in rebounds and other categories, and we're looking at 30-plus fantasy points at a sub-8K price. Unanimously and universally a big-time lock in that regard. Now, we do have Zed Key sitting there at 6.2 after he was priced at 5.8 last slate. Did have 21 against Rutgers. That was fine. We're seeing him the last two games since his injury come off the bench, but he's played a combined 57 minutes in those two games. So whether he starts or whether he comes off the bench, it doesn't really matter. He's going to be on the court playing a lot. I do worry about fouls for him in this one. Derek Walker on the other side has been a phenomenal and a grown-ass man that is just making life difficult for opposing front court players. I do worry about Zed Key here in this spot, even though the price is cheap. Justice Suing is a GBP look all the way at 6.7, borderline not interested. It is nice to see that he's playing a lot, though, and over his health issues. Now, if Thornton can't go, you have the likes of Sean McNeil there at 4.8, who has played 30-plus minutes in back-to-back games. He's definitely a guy that's not afraid to shoot, so you can look there. You have Tanner Holden, who did play 21 minutes last game, sitting at 3.7. We know Holden was such a big-time scorer at the mid-major level. He's clearly struggled to get playing time and really contribute here at Wright State. He was just a 30, 40 fantasy point per game guy. I don't mind using him, though, or possibly looking at his direction if he were to get into the starting lineup. depending on Thornton's status, or see a bump there, at the 3.7 price. We know he's talented, and Nebraska's a team that he can definitely get off against. Then you have, freshman Roddy Gale and a bunch of, non-factors. Like Kelly is not really a DFS option even at 4-1, even if he plays 30 minutes. We know he's only in there to play defense. He's just not going to score. He's really not going to shoot. He's not going to do a whole lot except stuff that's not going to show up in the box score, which is really what we care for the likes of DFS and fantasy purposes. We did see Eugene Brown with a surprise start recently, but then he got rug pulled and didn't play. I don't think he played at all in the second half in that Minnesota game. So sitting there at 3-1, if he were to start again, I think that you just ignore him probably, even without Thornton, because you just can't trust him. On the Ohio State side, it's a great matchup. Sensabaugh makes way too much sense to me. Let's figure out how to get him in there at 7-6. Zed Key definitely in play, and then depending on that Thornton situation, I could get down with a little Sean McNeil or possibly even Tanner Holden. With Key back, Okpara has fallen by the wayside, but still has a pretty high fantasy point per minute number if he can get back to 18 to 20 minutes. So I don't want to write him off completely, but he's no longer a priority value play. On the Nebraska side, there are injuries galore. Juwan Gary is out long-term, it sounds like, with a shoulder injury. That's rough. He was a big-time performer, borderline alpha on the team before Walker could get started this season. Sam Griesel, who has been a jack-of-all-trades type of player, dealing with a hip injury. Now, it did say that he could have played in their last game, it sounded like. So that's good news, because he's probably likely going to play in this one, and they definitely need him. But they ended up opting for him to sit. I think they gave him the choice, and he decided not to play, which you never usually see that with players. But I would expect him to be back and available against Ohio State. So usage-wise, we won't be forced to play a guy like C.J. Wilcher, who is obviously never playable ever again. Also saw his minutes go down against Purdue because he's been so bad. So I need Griesel to play, so I'm not tempted there. We saw a chalky Wilhelm Bradenbach get into major foul trouble. He was a non-factor. Won't have to be tempted into playing him. Kasai Tamanaga off the bench got hot, like he sometimes does, had over 20 fantasy points. I'd be curious to see if people go back to him there. Disappears, though, quite often. If Griesel plays, I would be very, very surprised if he does that again, and I would have almost no interest in using him. We did see a little bit of ownership on Denham Dawson, who played 25 minutes. Looked good early on, had like 5 fantasy points real quick, but finished with 6.5. Just his rates suck. This bench is just really quite bad. You're really just kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you try to play anyone besides Derek Walker, Sam Griesel, or Juwan Gary. We don't have the option to play Gary because he's hurt, and Griesel is ailing with the hip. So that leaves us with Derek Walker, an severely underpriced Derek Walker, and he continues to be severely underpriced, and he continues to be low owned. He just completely went off against Purdue, up against Zach Edey. He was like I said, a grown man, pushing that Purdue front court around with ease, taking mid-range jumpers, took a 3 and made it, but grabbing every rebound coming his way, setting up his teammates for easy shots, had some steals, 36 fantasy points. He's definitely primed for a 30-plus fantasy point game here at home. The only thing that can derail him is foul trouble, which he had really early foul trouble in Illinois. I think he only got a couple of minutes in that first half. Then he ended up playing most of the second half there, and it just didn't work out for him. I had a lot of Walker there, so that hurt me. But I love him. I think, he's clearly an 8K plus player at minimum. And the fact that the DK algo just has him stuck at the 7.4 price and people don't use him means I'll be having a lot of exposure to him, and I'm certainly not afraid to use him against Zed Key. If anything, I'm afraid of using Zed Key against him on the Nebraska Cornhuskers floor. Now the entire, and Walker, like the offense flows through him at such a high rate. He just does everything. And when you looked at past Derek Walker early in his career, a role player, right? Started to really blossom a little bit last year as a junior, but still not the guy on that Nebraska team that you'd look to as a main team guy usually, or a guy that you would be comfortable playing at 8K. Bryce McGowan, Alonzo Verge, Kobe Webster would always be taking shots. There's just Trey McGowan. There's just guys in front of him that took shots that didn't allow him to play. That was last year. The year before that, Teddy Allen, of course, just never met a shot he didn't like. Delano Banton, who was awesome when he was in college. There's just always been guys in front of him that took all the usage. And this year, there's not. His previous career high in usage was 17%. This year, it's 28.2%. His previous shot rate high was 15.7. This year, it's 26.2. And he's even become a more elite rebounder. You're just seeing a completely different player. He did have a combined rate over 22% last year, but this season you're seeing him push closer to a combined rate of 30%. And then the assist rate, which I fall over every time I see it because I just can't fathom it. But when you watch Nebraska play, you're like, wow, he's out here dropping dimes. 27.4% assist rate. In 7 conference games, he has a 29.5 assist rate, which is actually the 5th best mark in the conference. Previous high before that was a couple of years ago when it was 15.8%, and he's doubled that at this point. Has a block rate of 3%, which is actually down for his career average. And you'll see when he was on the floor before in his previous years, it was more of he's out there to block shots and clean up the glass from all these guards. They don't have the same kind of guards on their team. This whole entire offense runs through Walker. He touches the ball multiple times on every possession. His usage rate, I'm actually shocked it's not closer to like 35 with how much he does touch it. Great in all aspects of the game and continues to be underpriced. So I am definitely on Walker. He's a core play for me. Going up against Ohio State, they are a team that, they're sliding right now, 4 straight losses. You look at what opposing bigs have been able to do to them. Edey had a double-double. I know he gets a double-double against basically everyone. Cliff Omarui, he had a real nice outing, 14 and 11, 6 blocks. That's the type of outing we could see from Derek Walker here easily. I'm starting to see a trend here with bigs against this Ohio State team. Zed Key's very good on the glass, but he can't do it all himself. He is also foul prone at times and has been coming back and dealing with some injury issues. And we saw with Zed Key played 30 minutes against Minnesota the other day in that loss. Talon Cooper somehow had 11 rebounds, and he's one of the smaller guys on the floor. Dawson Garcia had 9. We're seeing guys come into the paint and take rebounds out of the hands of Ohio State guys. So I love the chances of Derek Walker having a monster double-double and then the chances of having a 30-plus fantasy point game and going 4x plus. I would be really, really disappointed if he doesn't. So he has my seal of approval. I'm all about Derek Walker here on this slate. Moving on, we have Pittsburgh versus Louisville. This is definitely a game you want to target. Every time the Ville is on the slate, you can look to L. Ellis and you can look to their opponent. Now, Pittsburgh is having a real strong season under Jeff Capel. He's was in the hot seat here. He's had way more talented teams than this that he hasn't been able to get wins over, and somehow with this group, he's been able to have wins over Syracuse, North Carolina, and Virginia, and played Clemson and Duke extremely close. Duke on their floor, and they still almost won that game. So pretty solid outings for them. For Pittsburgh, they did get the sad news of John Hughley, who just hasn't been healthy the last season and a half. He is going to be out for the rest of the year, so the front court duties fall onto the Graham brothers, who are still not playing much. But Federico, Blake Hinson, those two will be patrolling the paint, controlling the glass, and will take most of the front court minutes. Blake Hinson is kind of an undersized 4, but he's a very tough kid and certainly capable of handling himself against opposing big men. Hinson does lead the team in shot rate at 25.2%, has a usage rate of 24%, shooting 36% from long range, drawing 5.5 fouls per 40. Jamaris Burton leads the team in usage at 25.3%, has a shot rate of 24.5%. You know what? Hold on. I don't know how my sound is. I feel like I'm not loud. Give me a second here. Let's enhance the sound a little bit. All right. Okay. All right. This sounds much better. I'm feeling like I was way too far away from you guys. Yes, this is much better. All right. You do have Nelly Cummings transferred over from Colgate, taking shots, playing lots of minutes. Nike Sabande is somebody that we can certainly look at. He's been playing some extended minutes over the last 5 games, 19 plus minutes. He had a major breakout against Georgia Tech, scored 21 points and 6 rebounds, knocked down 3 of his 6 3-point attempts. So we're definitely going to be looking to him. He's only 4.3. He is somebody that I would expect to be a relatively popular value play. I'm certainly going to be looking to use him. He has only started 1 game this season, which was back on December 10th against Sacred Heart. Don't be afraid of that, though. He's playing big minutes, like I said, lately. With Hughley out, they've had to dip into their bench a little bit more and look for that production. He's certainly going to be a guy that is a main team core for me at that 4.3 price point. Looking at the game against Georgia Tech, the starting lineup they've been running without Hughley: Burton, Federico, Blake Hinson, Greg Elliott, and Nelly Cummings. Now off the bench, they're barely playing either of the Grahams. They're just too raw right now. Nate Santos, who played 10 minutes, and then Sabande, who played 35. So we're looking at a short rotation for Capel. We have a lot of that lately, especially in the ACC. So I'm all over him, starting or not. He's clearly a much better player than I think Greg Elliott is at this point. Greg Elliott is mainly just a 3-point shooter. He's not going to contribute much in other categories, although his rebounding has picked up lately. But he's definitely losing minutes to Sabande, and I think that is going to continue. And to a degree, Nelly Cummings, who has in the past when he was at Colgate been an absolutely lethal 3-point shooter. He's been pretty mediocre for Pitt overall. So that is our lock there with Sabande at 4.3. I like Jamarius Burton and a bounce back spot for him. I like when I say bounce back, like he's been having some pretty high upside. 3 of his last 4 games prior to last, he was over 30 fantasy points. He had a really slow start against Georgia Tech, and then he picked it up and ended up scoring 19 real. His peripherals were pretty weak. He's typically going to contribute 4 to 5 rebounds, 4 to 6 assists, a couple of steals. Like he's big time upside in this Pittsburgh offense and has a pretty high usage rate, as I already stated. And his shot attempts are going to typically be anywhere from 14 to 20. So at 7.7, I really like him as well in this spot against Louisville. I think he's going to play a lot, and I do think we could see a possible 40 out of Burton in a spot where people aren't going to be at that price point very often. You're already seeing Mr. Balance Betty over here. I'm highlighting Walker. I'm highlighting Burton, 2 guys in that 7K range. There's pay-ups to use. There's value to use. Castleton, KJ Williams, Soli Boom. Crazy to see him at 9.3. Broom, Bryce Hopkins, Justin Mutz is up there finally at 8.9. There's definitely some strong pay-up options, but this 7K range is already providing us with some really strong options as well, and we're seeing those balanced lineups. Tonight was value and scrubs because the value all crushed, but we're seeing balanced lineups start to, with tighter pricing, be the optimal way to build. So I'm big on Burton here as well. I'm sort of leaning towards a 2-man Pittsburgh stack. Blake Hinson has been not showing his upside lately. Look for him to bounce back. We were all over him against Syracuse. Obviously, that matchup against Syracuse is a damn cheat code. I just don't know why people aren't trying to fully take advantage of that. Still seeing low ownership on guys in the high post. But Hinson at 7.9 is probably more of a GPP look, while Burton is the main team look for me. But I like all 3 of those guys between Sabande, Hinson, and Burton. Federico at 6.3 is more of a GPP play also, but he's definitely in play against Louisville. And then Greg Elliott and Nelly Cummings are just okay. Louisville's side, it starts and nearly stops with L. Ellis. He's going to be forced to play the entire game as usual, one of the only guards they have. He is stuck at this low 8K range. I like it. I think I'm definitely on board looking at, what he's done over his last 5 games, 28 plus fantasy points, playing at extremely high level, and it's just, doing it in an efficient manner as well, contributing and assists, rebounds, scoring 20 plus real often. It's a tough season for Louisville, obviously 2-16. Probably not going to win this one either, but Ellis is definitely going to put up a healthy fantasy score. He is playing 89% of the minutes at his spot, which is top 30 in the country. Just can't leave the floor. Has a usage rate, which is top 15 in the country at 31.5%. Top 50 shot rate at 31%. Top 25 assist rate at 34.5%. And he's drawing 5.5 fouls per 40, which is also inside the top 100. So, L. Ellis, if you can fit him in there, he's definitely a guy that is not going to torpedo your lineup very often. Now, we did have some emergence from another Louisville player recently in Mike James. Sitting there at 6-1 now, I'm a little uncomfortable with that price increase. I could get down with the mid 5K for him. Obviously, could love 4K, but once we get over 6K hump with a second Louisville player, it's just a little bit nerve-wracking for me. He has been playing some pretty big minutes against North Carolina. He stunk, but prior to that, against a tough Clemson team, a tough Wake Forest team, he played extremely well, 26 and 39 fantasy points, and even against Syracuse, he had 31. Got really red hot over a 2-game period against Wake and Syracuse, where he hit 11 triples on just 17 attempts. So I don't hate him, but the price increase makes me not like him very much. Brendan Huntley Hatfield is questionable with a foot injury. I don't expect to actually see him. It doesn't change a whole lot for me. We do have Jalen Withers at 5-1 and Sidney Curry at 4-9. Both of them have had good fantasy performances in the past. And as early as this year, Sidney Curry became a chalky value guy that performed. He had a nice 3-game stretch against FAMU, Lipscomb, and NC State, and then he proceeded to fall back off the earth. However, sub 5K, definitely have to consider him going to be playing heavy minutes initially as a starter, a typical starter, I should say. Floor of maybe 18 to 21 minutes. I think he's just fine. But we're really just looking at LLS. I can't pretty it up too much for these Louisville guys. They're just not doing a whole lot for me. JJ Traynor did play 32 minutes last game, but he's a low fantasy point per minute player. You saw him get just 8 in that 32, so not really that exciting about him as a value option at all. I still would love to see them play Kamari Lansmore. I think he's very talented, but his minutes fluctuate too much. There's just really not a lot to get excited about here, and most of the usage is going to go to Ellis, and they're going to spread things out to a degree with as far as playing time and shot attempts. Roosevelt Wheeler in the mix as well. They're playing 18 to 20 minutes, so just nothing for this Louisville team outside of Ellis. All right, moving on, we have Virginia Tech versus Virginia. My man Justin Mutz has just been in autoplay for the last 8 slates. They finally adjusted his price a little bit, which is actually makes you have to think about it, because when he's sitting there in the low 8K range, it's just an auto click. Even when he has a bad game, he has a better game than 75% of the rest of the collegiate basketball league. So 38 minutes in each of his last 2 games, 35, 39, 41. He's just playing heavy minutes, scoring over 30 fantasy points. The matchup against Virginia, obviously, on the road at Virginia has to give us pause. We're now not getting that steep discount. If he was still 8-1, I wouldn't care who he's playing, but now we go up, $800 to $900. We have to really sit here and look and think, what's his actual upside in this spot. Now for Mutz, he doesn't need to score a lot to pay off big, because he thrives on the glass. He's a good passer. He gets steals. So a rock fight, slower pace matchup doesn't hurt him as much as it hurts other guys, like Grant Bessel. Darius Maddox is a pretty bad spot for him. Sean Padula, Hunter Couture when he's healthy. There's just, everyone else is kind of hurt by this. Mutz could actually still thrive and thrive quite well in the spot against Virginia. Looking back at previous history for Mutz against Virginia, let's see. Last year, February 14th, 8 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Obviously, that wouldn't get it done, but you see he's sprinkling in these peripheral stats. He's doing more than just scoring, which usually gives him a pretty high floor, but we're looking at a big price. January 12th, 2 points, 4 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal. So not great against Virginia. last season. Season before that, 4 points and 8 rebounds. Not great. So we're starting to see here he hasn't fared all that well against Virginia, and it's a situation where that price increase is just scaring me a little bit too much. Did you guys know Justin Mutz played for High Point? I forget about that all the time. High Point, of course, aka John Brown University. Great rates for Mutz, though. I think, with the rest of the industry likely jumping off, you could look to him for GPP purposes. 20.8% defensive rebounding rate, 22.5% assist rate, 3% block rate, 3% steal rate, shooting 45% from long range, so you can get it done out there. Still in play, but the 8-9 price definitely gives me pause. Sean Padula at 8-1. I'm not looking there either. Grant Basel at 7-3. Like, everybody's been playing pretty well, or the core group starters for the Hokies have been playing pretty well. So we've seen the price increases. With Hunter Couture still dealing with a forearm injury, we'll see how that goes. I know he still has a questionable tag, but according to Twitter, it sounds like he may give it a go. So obviously MJ Collins, minutes will go down. Lynn Kidd, who they've been going with a bigger lineup, his minutes will probably start to go back under, 15. Darius Maddox at 5-3. He's probably not worth looking at right now. He's just a scorer anyways. Don't like the matchup for him too much. Pretty much a universal avoid spot for most of the Hokies. It pains me to not be all in on Justin Mutz. Thankfully, DK has done me a favor by pricing him up. On the Virginia side, another one of my guys, Reese Beekman. I've just been a huge Beek fan for a long time. He is also a threat for a triple-double at times, or at least a double-double lately. He's been very, very good. We saw him against FSU struggle. He did take 10 shots, which is nice to see, because sometimes Beek, he has a tendency to defer too much, even when he has an open shot. They've been working with them on that, though. He has taken 22 shots total in his past 2 games, so we're seeing that aspect of his game improve. He has a high steal rate. He's going to contribute in multiple categories. If we can get him on a day when he shoots 10 to 15 times and he makes 40%, he can really elevate it, a slate and score 35 to 40 fantasy points. That's definitely something he's capable of. Looking at his rates this year, 21% usage rate, 19% shot rate, and assist rate of 33.5, which is top 30. Kihei Clark has 37.1, so they have 2 guys inside the top 30 in assist rate. Steal rate of 3.5% for Beek, shooting 48% from long range on 37 attempts. Virginia's actually, don't get it twisted, it's certainly not the Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, DeAndre Hunter team, but they have guys shooting as well as that group, with Beek shooting 48%, Armand Franklin shooting 40%. It's good to see him hitting shots again, and Kihei Clark shooting 39%. And then even Isaac McNeely, the freshman, he's shooting 41% on 64 attempts. Keep an eye on McNeely as the season goes on and into next season. He's going to be a big-time performer for them, and we're seeing his minutes really start to solidify around that 20-minute mark, and he's been a pretty solid factor, even though he hasn't been a starter, getting those minutes and being a reliable option, and he is sitting there at 3-3. Obviously, the matchup on the other side against the Hokies isn't great. We're looking at 2 teams capable of containing, locking down each other. But I definitely can see the reasons for playing a guy like McNeely, who's locked into those 20 minutes and possibly going to get more. Logs aren't sexy, but he is shooting at a high clip. All it's going to take at 3-3 is him hitting 3 threes, grabbing a rebound or assist, and you're right there. So definitely don't hate it. We're seeing Ben Vanderplas just erupt into the Ohio version of himself. Pretty decent start to the season against non-con opponents, and then the month of December was forgettable for him. But in ACC play, especially lately, he's starting to come around. He had a big game against North Carolina, 17-8 for 40 fantasy points. His price skyrocketed against FSU. He had 29. He's taken 21 shots in the past 2 games. The big thing here is we're starting to see a little bit of a shakeup there. He's starting games, and they're bringing Caden Shedrick off the bench, Shedrick was a starter for most of the season. He only played 5 games. Shedrick's a big-time fouler. He only played 5 minutes. He's a big-time fouler, but against Florida State, just 5 minutes. Against North Carolina, only 18, and his minutes are going the wrong direction, while Vanderplas's minutes are going the other direction. And he just gives them a little bit more offensive skill set. Plas is tough enough to guard other teams' fours, and he's just going to be more of a threat to shoot the ball than Shedrick is, who needs to really, get it on the block to do anything too devastating. So I like this lineup for Virginia. And I think Vanderplas is definitely still in play, even though his price has gone up considerably, sitting there at 5.6. He's a good main team type look in a balanced type of lineup if this shot, taking is going to continue. I do think he'll continue to start, and I think that even though the Hokies defense is definitely legitimate, that he can pay off this price with the volume he's taking. The defense is going to have to pay close attention to a renewed, rejuvenated Armaan Franklin, who looks like early career Indiana Hoosiers version of Franklin, complete non-factor most of last year. But you look at his last 6 games, 27 plus fantasy points, hasn't been under 30 in 3 straight, Syracuse, UNC, and FSU. Definitely easier opponents defensively to do damage against, but he's playing well. I'm still not looking to him as a play. It's one of those situations like with Richmond, Kadary Richmond. I missed the boat at the cheaper price. I didn't get him at 5K, 4.8, so I'm not suddenly going to jump on and start playing him at 6.8. I just have to chalk it up to I was late on Franklin, and I'm not using him at 7K. I would use Reese Beekman at 7K because he's not so reliant on scoring, and he's going to contribute in multiple categories. So I'm definitely looking to him, but I'm not looking to Kie Clark at 7.3 or Franklin. So it's Beekman and Vanderplas. Now, what is going on with Jaden Gardner is what I need to talk to you guys about, because his price is only 5.7. Definitely early season or ECU Jaden Gardner, like that would be just a super lock and load. But his minutes have dwindled recently. He's looked very, very, very sorry. His shot making hasn't been there. He's not aggressive on the glass at all. He had a great matchup against Georgia Tech, and he ended up scoring 14 real, but 19 fantasy points. Didn't do anything on the glass like I thought he would. Playing way too passive, and we're starting to see him lose minutes to a smaller lineup with Isaac McNeely and Ryan Dunn playing minutes, the 2 freshmen. Shedrick's losing minutes, Gardner's losing minutes. We're seeing a rotation of that 5th spot with Clark, Beekman, Vanderplas, and Franklin playing 30 plus. And I think that's going to continue for now. Not great for Gardner's confidence, but something's going on there. I don't know if there's his girlfriend broke up with him. He says a hidden injury. Again, we're dealing with college kids. There's a myriad of things that could happen, but he has just been so bad lately, and the 5.7 price ordinarily on him would be an easy lock and load, but I'm just not sure that we can use him right now. So I like the Virginia side more than the Virginia Tech side for DFS purposes. I'll leave it at that. All right, we better kick it into high gear here. I was a little late today, and we've still got several games. TCU versus West Virginia. TCU has been fantastic. Mike Miles, Damian Bow, great backcourt, both approaching that 8K range. Emmanuel Miller has been really good recently. After kind of a slower start to the season, he's sitting there at 7.5, coming off of a 40 against K-State. Really consistent option on the road against West Virginia. Maybe not the best spot to necessarily target him, but those 3 guys, Bow, Miles, and Miller, are your main looks there. Lampkin had a nice game against K-State as well, but I'm typically not looking to play him at 6.1. Same thing with O'Bannon, whose minutes have been fluctuating in the wrong direction, at least recently. Not really looking at him either. Looking at the rates on those top 3 guys, because usually it's Mike Miles that we're thinking of as the best, and he does have the highest usage rate at 26.8% and the highest shot rate at 25.5%. Also has an assist rate of 21.2%, steal rate of 3%, shooting 38% from long range. 30%. Don't have my rec specs on today. I couldn't read that. So he's always in play, of course. Damian Bow is who I've been liking more, and again, I have my guys. He did me really solid last year. Almost had a 50 at one time. But he's been really consistent this year, and he's playing the best basketball of his career. He was a little underwhelming against K-State with the performances of Miller and Miles, but still you saw contributions in each category, 11 points, 5 rebounds, couple of assists, couple of steals. His assist number is generally going to be way higher than that. You saw the game before that against Texas. He had 10, 5 against Iowa State, 7 against Baylor. He's definitely going to initiate a lot of offense and generate a lot of assist opportunities. And he's also scoring a lot more this year as well. Shot rate sitting at 20%, but a 22% usage rate, 27% assist rate. He's a guy that we can look at when the rest of the industry is going to Miles or even paying down for a few hundred to Miller. Bow just falls in this no man's land where nobody's going to use him, but he definitely has the same floor as those guys, and he certainly has the ability to match their upside or possibly exceed in the right scenario. And going up against West Virginia, it's not a spot that terrifies me by any means, so I definitely like him. Miller, his rates, 24% shot rate, combined rebounding rate over 23%, a block rate of 3%, and he's shooting 48% from long range on 27 attempts. So he's a little bit of an undersized 4-5. He's woken up at the 3-point range. I don't know what's going on there. His previous career high was 25%, which was last year on 45 attempts coming over from the Aggies. He's already taken 27 through 14 games. He's made 13 for 48 to 49%. He actually, in conference, has a top 10 3-point shooting percentage. So we'll see if that continues, because that added element of his game makes it very difficult for opposing bigs to defend. West Virginia side, my man, it's Trey Mitchell. Love Trey. He is definitely my favorite West Virginia play. I think he is a really nice play at 7-2. I think he's going to go a little overlooked, even though he's been good lately. Putting up 35 against a very tough Oklahoma defense is impressive. Putting up 38 against a Baylor defense that's not as impressive without Everyday John, but still impressive to see that score. Against Kansas, 25. Against an Oklahoma State defense that's legit, 33. Against K-State, who is a fantasy-friendly unit, but still has the bodies to throw at you and attack the glass. Very good on rebounding squad. He had 13 rebounds against them, 35 fantasy points. He's just not getting the respect, and in conference play, he's tearing it up. He should certainly be higher than 7-2, and that's yet another guy in that 7K range. We're talking Walker. We're talking Mitchell. That just looks like a main team play that's going to go, like I said, a little bit overlooked. We're looking at Burton. Like, this 7K to 8K range is absolutely loaded. So I'm on Trey Mitchell, certainly. Usage rate and shot rate aren't the highest on the team. Eric Stevenson, who isn't that good, has a 31% shot rate. Trey Mitchell's is 22.5%, but he's been much more efficient. 22% usage rate. 19.2% defensive rebounding rate. He's getting to the foul line at a pretty high clip, drawing almost 5 per 40, shooting 78% from the foul line when he gets there. You love to see that. Shooting 57% on 2-point field goals and shooting 40% on 3-point field goals. So my man Trey Mitchell, who had a forgettable season for Texas, has gone back to looking much more dominant and the version of himself that was so good when he was at UMass. Love Trey Mitchell in this spot against TCU at home. Look for him to perform at a very high level. Then the next tier of guys for West Virginia is Eric Stevenson, who is just never met a shot he didn't like. You'll have to forgive me for being anti-Eric Stevenson. He played for the Huskies for 1 year and just was awful. Just not a big gut fan of his. He needs to be cheaper before I consider him. Kedrian Johnson at 6K is interesting. Has scored 20-plus fantasy points in 6 of his last 8. Don't necessarily like the 6K price, but I think he's like one of those spots where his last guy in. Absolutely. We don't start our lineups with him, but if you end up with that range and you don't have Trey Mitchell, I'm absolutely on board with using him. Emmett Matthews at 5'9". No. Joe Toussaint at 5'3". He is actually a pretty intriguing play. Looking at it, coming over from Iowa, he was, a role player, low usage most of the time, low shot rate. Last year, I should say. The year before that, he did have a pretty high usage rate, but last year, definitely a regression season. This season, though, back up to a 26% usage rate, 27% shot rate, has an assist rate of 24%. He's drawing over 5 fouls per 40, shooting 33% from long range, which is a career high on 51 attempts, which is also a career high already. Previous career high of 37 attempts. He is getting called for 5 fouls per 40, so he does get a little handsy at times, but he is a very intriguing option at this 5.3 price point. Not necessarily a tournament or large field play, but one of those guys that I'm comfortable using in single entry, WTAs, head-to-head, stuff like that. Just seeing that high usage, high shot, rate that he has, he's capable of performing in a matchup like this because defense is typically looking to Mitchell, Stevenson. Toussaint's just not getting that attention that those guys are, which is giving him the opportunity to perform. We also have Jimmy Bell. He has been a pretty tough kid. He was a strong play in the non-con for a while, but has definitely fallen off in conference play, but sitting there at 5-1, don't necessarily hate that. Mohamed Weg, no, he had some bigger minutes earlier, but he's just not getting them now. Seth Williams had a nice minute spike against Baylor, and then it fell back to 9. So really just on the Trey Mitchell train, maybe some Toussaint, but there's really nothing else on this West Virginia team that's going to excite me all that much. Off the bench, we did see Kobe Johnson play 15 last minute. Joe played 21, and then basically the rest of the starters all played 20-plus minutes. So we're seeing another team with a lower or shallow rotation, which is great if you plan to use my man Trey Mitchell. All right, next game here, Xavier versus DePaul. Xavier has been involved in some super fantasy-friendly games. Just they're playing at a very fast pace, top 15 in the country. Their offense is 5th best when it comes to efficiency. They're going to be playing against a DePaul team that plays 80th in tempo ranking. Not very efficient on defense or offense, but we're looking at a fast-paced game that is going to give the opportunity to the Musketeers to score 90-plus points. And DePaul, may come along and score 80-plus. With DePaul, Umoja Gibson, I've talked about it at length. He's not an alpha, or he's not best as the alpha. He's much better as a high-level role player. They still have to use him in that role. He does have a 24% usage rate, 30.4% assist rate. Javon Johnson playing 88% of the minutes, shooting 41% from long range. He's done really well for them. Errol Penn, who is really good in the non-con, he's fallen off. Jalen Terry's kind of fallen off. The man who has stepped up is actually Deshaun Nelson, who has seemingly come out of nowhere. It's a JUCO transfer. Early on in the season, he was a non-factor, although he did have some games where he put together some 15-7 performances, 18-5, but nobody really noticed it. It was against teams like Samford and, Western Illinois, whatever. In conference play, though, he has really looked like a completely different player and somebody that we can actually consider for DFS purposes. His price, because of these performances, has, of course, increased. He's almost $7K now, but we're looking at, against Providence, 33, against Butler, 23, 40 against Nova, 24 against Seton Hall. Xavier is definitely a matchup where if he continues to see these 30-plus minutes, he could definitely be a viable option and still pay off the elevated price of 6-7. Doesn't necessarily feel all that good paying it for him, but he's definitely in play. Umoja Gibson, I think, can definitely perform. The industry is very sour on him. I think we could be looking at him and, oh, wow, look at that. He's priced at 7.2. Another guy in the 7K range that I like. That's weird. Over 20 fantasy points in 3 straight. 53 against Georgetown recently. Still capable of absolutely exploding and getting hot from long range. We know he's going to take a ton of shots, so we have to consider him. This matchup against Xavier is just too good not to. Your and I at 5.3 is interesting. 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. He's going to have to keep, Nunge and Fremantle in check. We'll see how that goes for him. At 5.3, he's definitely in the conversation. Caleb Murphy still hasn't played a game yet, dealing with that wrist injury. However, there is talks that he has been doing basketball-related activities, so we'll see. They could certainly use him. The season's obviously a loss for DePaul, but they could definitely use Caleb Murphy right now in the court. And we'll keep an eye on him because when it's time for him to play or get inserted back in the starting lineup, he's going to be relatively cheap, and he was a pretty high-level performer at South Florida at times last year. Xavier, we don't want to get caught fading them. Their prices are all up. They continue to smash. They just are involved in these games that are just the best on the slate when it comes to fantasy production. DK's done a good job of pricing them up to make it difficult, though. Sully Boom at almost, 9.5K is a crazy price. He was a really nice play at UTEP for years at mid-7 range. Now he's taken over as the offensive initiator for Xavier, and now we're talking about paying a huge price for him. 20.8% usage rate, 23% assist rate, shooting 45% from long range, drawing 5 fouls per 40, just really playing well. Colby Jones, 21.5% usage rate, 26.9% assist rate, shooting 45% from long range. Zach Freemantle, 24.5% defensive rebounding rate, a 23% usage rate. He is shooting 64% from long range, but he's taken only 14 attempts. Jack Nunge, one of the highest offensive ratings on the team behind Boom, 22% usage rate, 23% shot rate, combined rebounding rate of 30%, block rate of 5%, drawing 5 fouls per 40, shooting 41% on 50 attempts. So Xavier's just got their entire starting 5 capable of shooting the lights out from long range. Adam Kunkel, who is finally healthy and in the lineup now, he's shooting 39% from long range. So you have to really consider these Xavier guys in a spot against DePaul where they're just going to completely wreck it. I was really wanting to use Jack Nunge last time. He was a bit priced out where I couldn't get to him. It wasn't that I didn't like the price. It was just I couldn't get there. I didn't have the salary. I knew one of him or Free were going to tear up Marquette because we know at this point Biggs versus Marquette is a DVP spot. Nunge ends up having 16 points, 13 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals, melts it down. Fremantle had 10 and 8, not as good of a game. But damn, Nunge is just too good. He's the one that I want to play, sitting there at 8.4. He happens to be the cheapest of the 4, so that certainly helps. Pretty much a guaranteed 30-plus, minutes as long as he doesn't get into any early foul trouble. He just has such a nice high floor. 12-plus rebounds in 3 of his last 5 games. Just a little more consistent than Fremantle for me. Fremantle's had some pretty big games recently. We saw him put up 45 against UConn, which is phenomenal. 53 against Villanova. We've seen bigs against them do pretty well. But I just don't see the consistency there. For 100 less, give me Nunge and maybe a little bit lower ownership because I'm a big Jack Nunge fan typically. Like Colby Jones a lot, but I find myself struggling to pay that price for him. He's got less highs, but way less lows as well. So you're paying for safety when you're looking at Colby Jones, guy who's going to keep churning out 30 to 35. Nothing wrong with that. We're looking at a pretty steep price. Sully Boom at 9.3, capable of destroying the slate, just on the floor for most of the game. If he's not scoring, he's assisting, and now he's rebounding at a super high level in conference play. 6 rebounds against Marquette, 5 against Creighton, 10 against Villanova, 5 against UConn, 6 against St. John's. Like, there's no reason for opposing teams to allow Sully Boom to be rebounding 5+ times against them. That's embarrassing for them. It's great for him. He's putting up some massive, massive fantasy scores. 9.3 just feels a little bit steep. However, it's DePaul. But they've done a nice job of pricing them because you can't stack Xavier and make a competitive lineup. You're going to end up playing a bunch of 3.5K guys who are going to barely play. However, it could be that situation. Do you guys remember going into story time? I know I'm running behind on time, but this is my show, damn it. And if you're watching, you have to listen to me. What was it? A couple years ago with Rui. Let's find out that Gonzaga team. Can't remember. I think it was either 1920. All right, yeah. Rui Hachimura, Brandon Clark, Zach Norvell, Josh Perkins, and then, of course, Corey Kispert. But this was before Kispert had a higher usage guy. He was like the fifth Beatle. He didn't really, do much besides shoot threes. But there was a time when they were all priced between 7 and 8K. They did all the production for that Gonzaga team. All of them were consistently hitting 30-plus fantasy points. And it made sense to just play all 4. Like, I was consistently playing 3 of them, but there came a point in the season where, and a lot of people started doing it, you just played all 4. You worried about the rest of your lineup later, but you were getting 35 to 40 fantasy points guaranteed from those 4 spots. then you would just hope the rest of your lineup could be, competitive enough to be 3x, because if they could, you were cashing everything. So it continually just was the 4-man Gonzaga stack all 2019 to 2020. It just was. I'm kind of getting those vibes from the Xavier team, honestly. Like, I don't know that we can, because they're definitely priced higher than that Gonzaga team was. But I don't think we're looking at any of those 4 primary options for Xavier under 30 fantasy points in this matchup. So I'm going to play around with some lineups in a GPP, but it's looking like, Xavier, a minimum a 2-man Xavier stack is going to put you in a position to really have a high score and possibly set yourself aside, because I just don't think that people who are going to be paying up are going to do it for 2 guys on a team. They're going to look towards Castleton or Broom or one of the other guys along with Xavier. People are not necessarily anti-stacking in college basketball, but they're definitely not as gung-ho about it as yours truly. Moving on, Arkansas versus Missouri. This is a game that it's SEC games I definitely like for DFS, but this one doesn't look great, and it's going to be higher scoring, but I just don't have a very good feeling about any of the options in this game. I feel like there's going to be some really massive busts, and there's going to be some unsung heroes that end up, blowing the doors off the slate. So it does have the GPP feel to me. I'm certainly treading lightly with it. The prices are up on the primary Missouri guys. Kobe Brown at 8-2, just coming off that 41 against Florida. Demoy Hodge, who's been uber consistent, but $8K for him it was high priced even when he was scoring 30 plus. He had that streak of games 30 plus. It's especially high priced now. Let's look back when Missouri played Arkansas. They have already met once this season. It was a 74-68 game at Bud Walton Arena. Hodge pretty well shut down, had just 6 points, 3 rebounds, 3 steals. Nick Honor had 12 and 2. Trago Million had 7 and 1. Kobe Brown 11 and 2. Ronnie DeGray started, barely played. Sean East had the best game, 13, 4 and 3. Noah Carter 7. DeAndre Golston 7. So really nothing doing there for that Missouri team. On the Arkansas side, Devo Davis had 10, 5 and 5, but 5 turnovers, but still solid. Ricky Council had a nice game, 25 and 7. Anthony Black 6 and 5. Jordan Walsh 6 and 7. Mekhi Mitchell 8 and 7. Then we saw Joseph Pinion and Kamani Johnson off the bench for 20 plus minutes. Pinion had 13 real. So if anything, I guess the Arkansas side here, but the would be in play. But Missouri, I'm definitely not feeling any of their guys. Nick Honor is I guess maybe the best point per dollar play, and then also when factoring in playing time, but he's far cry from the version of himself that could really put the ball in the basket at a high level, be a primary alpha like scorer like he was at Fordham. Feels like a lifetime ago at this point. He just really isn't doing a whole lot in terms of fantasy point per minute number that really excites me. So I'm not even really looking at him at the 5-2. I do like Sean East. He became a play in this low 5K range that definitely was in consideration, but he's fallen off recently, in the likes of Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and Florida. He's been under 20 fantasy points in all of those games. So there's really just nothing that I can get behind here on this Missouri team, at least right now. Betting opportunities, possibly. DFS, no. Now for Arkansas, still without Nick Smith, which is going to go down as one of the all-time bad beats for me because I traded up for the second pick in multiple leagues and drafted Nick Smith only to not ever get to use him. But Ricky Council sitting there at 7-6. The most logical play in the 7K range, that's fine, but I just feel much better about guys like Walker, Jamaris Burton. Council's definitely been good, and there's been a few times here recently they've been bringing him off the bench. Obviously, good history at Wichita State, coming off the bench as a sixth man of the year type of player. It's been fine using him off the bench. He, in that one game, he did have 15 and 5. They went back to him in the starting lineup against Vanderbilt, played all 40 minutes, scored 24 real points, had 3 rebounds. So you know what you're going to get paying for him. He's going to play most, if not all, of the game. So it's totally fine. Without Smith and Brazil, Council is going to remain one of the best players on this team, highest usage guy. Anthony Black has been an up and down performer. I think GPP-wise, definitely worth a shot, but I don't have any confidence in him to perform on the road. Devo Davis, whose price has started creeping up at almost 7K now after a couple of solid performances. 4 of his last 5, he's been over 25 fantasy points, but we know Devo can get rug pulled or simply disappear at any time. Do we really feel okay paying almost 7K for him? Not really. Mekhi Mitchell, who has a very nice fantasy point per minute number when he can stay on the floor and avoid foul trouble. He doesn't warrant being 7K. Scoring around 18 to 23 fantasy points. He did have the big game against LSU where he scored 30, but I'm not paying 7K for a guy who is absolutely going to get into foul trouble and likely won't even be able to eclipse 20 minutes because of it on the road. So tread lightly there at 7K. You do have his brother Mikal at 3.7, who is a little more appealing, has played 17 plus minutes in his past 2 games, has scored 15.5 fantasy points in back-to-back games. So if anything, I guess I could see playing Mekhi Mitchell and hoping his brother Mekhi ends up in foul trouble and has to sit. Is he a main team value? I think I could be okay with that. Yeah. You do have Jordan Walsh, who has seen his minutes decline a little bit, sitting there at 5.8. Declining minutes are never good. And then Jalen Graham, who did play 19 minutes against Bama. Seemed like, is ASU Jalen Graham going to come to the party finally? No. Against Vanderbilt, played 5 minutes. Just nothing doing there. Can't use him. So Mekhi Mitchell or all the way up to Ricky Council is really the play there. Providence versus Marquette. Now we're getting into the situation where Balance Betty, Walter Waddell, might not be able to do balance because I'm looking at the DVP here against Marquette and absolutely salivating at what I think Bryce Hopkins and to a lesser degree Ed Crosswell can do in this spot. Bryce Hopkins, 9K. It's a steep price. He has had the game against St. John's, he was terrible in. The game against DePaul, he was mediocre in. He's had some really nice matchups like this where he kind of just wet the bed. And in the tougher spots like Creighton and UConn, he just completely obliterated. Now, he's played Marquette once already this season. You guys might remember that. This was a spot where Mike and I were talking about it. He liked Crosswell. I liked Hopkins. We liked both, really. There was honestly a case for playing both of them. I was a little bit lucky, ended up on Hopkins. It went to overtime. He was doing the full Zach Randolph thing, missing bunnies, cherry picking, grabbing his own rebound off those missed bunnies, just racking it up. 29 points, 23 rebounds, had a 68.5 fantasy point performance, just like what we saw out of Oscar today on that late slate. What do you have, 29 and 22 or something crazy like that? Going to play all the minutes he can handle. Now it's on the road. Don't care. Marquette is just a beautiful matchup. Got to go back to Bryce Hopkins, just the best in the Big East when it comes to matchups that you're possibly going to find. If you can't afford Hopkins, may the DFS gods have mercy on your soul. You can go to Ed Crosswell at 7.4 if you have to. He had 36 against Marquette, 24-2. He's definitely going to just absolutely crush them. Little less excited about Crosswell on the road because there are foul issues that exist there. But as long as he can get to the 30-minute mark, he will obliterate the 7.4 price point. So Hopkins and Crosswell are absolutely top 2 plays on this slate, and I have no issue stacking them up in this spot. Jared Bynum, who has been dealing with an abdomen issue, does sound like he's going to remain a game-time decision. We've seen him in the last couple of games. He's been trying to he's traveled with the team, trying to get out there. Hasn't worked out. If he remains out, you still have Allen Breed as 4-5 value option, playing big minutes, has played 26-plus minutes in 4 straight, to 19-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. Definitely there. However, if you're going the Hopkins-Crosswell route, I don't know that I can go 3 Providence. That seems a little excessive to me, even though their rotation is yet another team that is rather lean. You also have Noah Locke sitting there at 4.9. He's been playing pretty well lately, but obviously we know he's shot reliant, and as that price creeps up to 5K and beyond, he just falls back into unplayable for me. Then you have Devin Carter, Back-to-back 30s. He has scored 30-plus fantasy points in 5 of his last 6, which includes a game against Marquette in which he had 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. So maybe the 3-man Providence stack will work. I mean, there's going to be so much fantasy goodness from the Providence side here. I don't know how you don't have multiple pieces of exposure in this one. If you can find a way, and you can't, trust me, you won't be able to unless you sacrifice 3 spots to bagel. If you can find a way to play multiple Xavier, multiple Providence, and still get Derek Walker in there, you would be absolutely crushing the rest of the field. But unfortunately, this thing called salary cap will prevent you from doing that. If you fade Hopkins and go Crosswell only, you can get a little wicked with some of the Xavier guys, though. Some combinations of lineups that look really sexy. So keep that in mind as you're building. Providence, Xavier, Walker, those are my priority plays, and I definitely think you can put up a huge score if you figure out a way to combo them the right way. Hopkins, 24% usage rate, almost 25 now. Ed Crosswell, 21.5% usage rate after being a career role player, stepping into a much bigger role. 5th best offensive rebounding rate in the country at 18%, 4% block rate, 3% steal rate, drawing 5 fouls per 40. If he can stay on the floor, play 30-plus minutes, look for him to put up a big GPP winning score right next to Bryce Hopkins. On the Marquette side, let's just pull up that game. It's going to be a close one. We saw it, go to double OT. Obviously, that juiced up everyone's stats. Oso Ighodaro, 15, 6, and 4. Cam Jones, 24 and 4. Tyler Kolek, 29 and 5 steals. David Joplin had 18. Everybody else mostly irrelevant. Oliver Maxence Prosper played 38 minutes, but didn't do a whole lot. These guys are much more reasonably priced. Between Kolek at 7.8, Ighodaro at 7.7, and Cam Jones at 7.6. I could easily see using any of those guys. Providence defense is definitely on the tougher side, but the sub 8K price points on these guys and playing big minutes, they could still pay it off. And we already know it's likely to be a pretty close game going down to the wire between these two. You're getting into more value territory where maybe it's a possibility of using them for a main team. When you look to a guy like David Joplin, who's going to play around 20 minutes, Joplin has a pretty high usage rate overall. It's actually the highest on the team at 25.5%, has the highest shot rate at 27.8%, shooting 40% from long range. Would be nice to see the minutes, creep more to the mid-20s because he could really do some damage. But right now, he's kind of capped at the 18 to 20 minute mark and certainly a last man in type of play. You do have Stevie Mitchell at 5'1", playing 20-plus minutes. He was a popular value recently. He's just kind of okay. Sean Jones, who looked really good against UConn. Minutes evaporate against Xavier. Not playable, but definitely a guy that Shaka likes. I could see his minutes spike in this spot as they need to, defend Bryce Hopkins and some of these other guys from just getting easy dunks and layups and do, paint buckets over and over and over again. We could see Jones, who's capable of guarding guys a little bit bigger than him, and see if he can get into the game. But I love Hopkins. I love Crosswell, going to be heavily involved on the Providence side. Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State, big-time rivalry game. Grant Sherfield was very good to us over the weekend, 35 against West Virginia at 7.2. Now his price is 7.4. Still not high enough to fully get away from. It's going to be difficult to get there with some of the other priority options, but Sherfield is just a walking 30. Very safe with Grant Sherfield. This is high usage rate, high shot rate. He's going to be on the floor for the entire game, essentially. Definitely looking at the softer part of the Oklahoma State defense on the perimeter where you can still take advantage. I just feel like he's going to fall outside of my player pool or my main lineup. And I think he's going to be pretty low owned like he was last slate. So keep that in mind as you're building. If you're looking for some differentiation points, Grant Sherfield offers you a really safe option at low rostership. Tanner Groves, Jalen Hill, Jacob Groves, not super exciting. Milos Uzan has been a wonderful value. Getting into the starting lineup, he's playing 35-plus minutes consistently. He had a really big game against West Virginia, 30 12.25 fantasy points, 11, 9, and 5. Flirted with a triple-double against Texas Tech. He had 25 fantasy points, 18, 3, and 1. So you can definitely look to Milos here against Oklahoma State. It is one of those situations I keep harping on. You know, he's over 5K now, but he's 5-1. Still a value for that price point. Cowboy side, don't love targeting against Porter Moser. His defense is typically very elite. They're tough. Mo Cisse, dealing with an ankle injury, has been able to practice. We'll see how that shakes out. Caleb Boone has been the main benefactor with Cisse out, but his price has ballooned up to 7-1. I do think that Cisse and Boone can terrorize this Oklahoma front court. I think they're a lot tougher than they are. But we'll see how that shakes out. Fouls obviously exist. It helps that they're at home, and Cisse still dealing with the, injury, and then Boone just having a massive foul rate where he could go for a highlight block and end up screwing up and picking up two quick fouls. Avery Anderson is pretty cheap at 6'3". He was dealing with an issue that was a wrist injury that was potentially going to cost him the Baylor game, but he did play 30 minutes there. He's just not performing like I thought he would, and it's getting really tough to consider him, but the price continues to drop. Now, if we see this 6'3" get to 5'8", 5'5", I don't care how bad he's been at that point. The upside is way too high. We know his past and what he's shown before. He's definitely going to become a priority play if that price keeps slipping. So go ahead and have a bad game at least one or two more times, Avery. Bryce Thompson at 5'6". He's had some monster performances. He's a pretty lackluster option in this one. Same with John Michael Wright. Tyreek Smith, who was a popular value option with Cisse on the bench, hasn't performed very well with Cisse out, but he has played big minutes, 23, 24, and 28 over the last three. And against K-State, he did have a 20 fantasy point performance. So at 3.9, if Cisse's out, he is still technically in play at that price point. And then the slate finishes up with Oregon versus Cal. Oregon is terrible. You love to see it. You absolutely love to see it. Cal is horrible. Something has to give here. Oregon has had a rough season, but they did knock off Arizona in a big way, 87-68, which was one of the more shocking results of the season for me because they got blown out by ASU and they got blown out by Colorado. They lost to Utah Valley. They just have not been good at all, and I love it. So we'll see, but Cal is a very easy matchup. They should perform well here. Will Richardson's playing 91% of the minutes, which is top 20 in the country, so he doesn't leave the floor very often. 24% usage rate, 31% assist rate, shooting 33% from long range. And Folly Dante has been phenomenal in the post with his numbers, 25% shot rate, 27% usage rate, a combined rebounding rate of 33%, actually 13.3% offensive rebounding rate, which is top 60, a block rate of 6%, a steal rate of 3%, drawing 5.4 fouls per 40. The freshman 7-footer, Kel Ware, he had some really nice games throughout the season. Obviously, an inconsistent type of player, still raw. The minutes have really kind of started to evaporate on him as well. The price has tumbled down to 5.2, which if he gets back to 20-plus minutes, he looks like a really phenomenal option against Cal because the DVP is great. He also scored 22 fantasy points in only 13 minutes against Utah, so he can fill it up in a hurry. He can score from outside or inside. He can rebound well. He can block shots. Really uber athletic 7-footer, capable of doing a myriad of things. It's just the playing time that is the main issue here. But I definitely have my eye on him at 5.2. Quincy Guerrier, seen better days. Syracuse, Guerrier might be fully dead. Not looking at him too much, but against Cal, again, everybody gets that boost. Dante at 8.1 is probably the most appealing because he's way stronger than anyone on that Cal front court. But 8.1 is probably going to be a price that we're just not able to have the luxury to pay. There's just other spots, better fantasy environments that we've already talked about that I think we need to have. So I'm feeling pretty good about him. I just don't think we're going to be able to use him. You do have Cuisinart on there at 5.3. Shot 9 for 14 last time, 44 fantasy points. I wonder if people are going to chase him. Go see Mom. Go in the bedroom. I'll be right there, okay? Go ahead. Just wrapping up here. Sorry. The little one just woke up, it looks like. I'll be right there. Go lay down. Unless you're coming out here to tell us some plays, you go lay down, young lady. All right. So, yeah, 9 for 14. I wonder if people would chase that performance. He's sitting there at 5-3. I definitely see him being chalk. And you guys might remember a chalky Cuisinart is a very profitable fade, or he has been throughout the course of his career. When he played for South Carolina, there were times where he would be priced at 4.8 and 5.5 and just really cheap, and would have a nice game off the slate, which would cause people to all flock to him. And then he would just play atrociously. He would end up with like 7 points, 1 rebound, and nothing else in 30 minutes. And he would do it often. So I am going to keep my eye on what the projections on what I think rostership will be there. It's a great matchup for him. If the minutes are going to, explode into the 30s like that, which they very well might, because Oregon needs a consistent scorer, he's going to play a lot. Consistent isn't really Cuisinart's thing, though, so we'll see how that shakes out. It's still better than having to play Brennan Rigsby, 30-plus minutes like they were doing, although Rigsby did us well in DFS for a couple of slates, so can't hate on him too much. Bartholomew, the Colorado transfer, he hasn't been able to offer too much, although he looked really good against Arizona as well. His minutes might be starting to come back up. I would actually be more inclined to use him at 3.8, especially now that he is healthy playing. The Oregon Ducks are getting their guys back, which is certainly going to be helpful. Looking at that Arizona game, let's pull this up here, because this could be scary with a full-strength Oregon team, which would not be fun. They started Richardson, Cuisinart, Dante, Nate Biddle, and Rivaldo Soares. Now, Soares and Biddle, expect their minutes, even if they're going to continue to start, to be on the lower end. Quincy Guerrier is still going to be a 20-plus minute guy, whether he starts or not. And then Kashawn Bartholomew, now that he's healthy, they're going to get him in there for 20-plus minutes. Then you'll see Brennan Rigsby start to drop down below 10, and Kel Ware anywhere from right now 5 minutes all the way up to 25 minutes. So this Oregon Ducks lineup doesn't look as putrid as it has in the past as guys are getting healthy. I do have personally a lot of interest in Bartholomew. Would love to see him actually start. It is the last game on the slate, so we won't have that luxury. We'll have to make a decision if we're gonna play Bartholomew. You might have to lay out 2 spots so you can double swap, or you may have to end up swapping to somebody like Alajiki, which isn't great, or leave yourself 1K, which isn't easy, and going up to DeJuan Clayton, the value for Cal, who has been really good. 2 of his last 4 games, he's been at 20-plus fantasy points, which he had 41 against Stanford, 26 and 6, shot 6 for 8 from downtown, sitting there at 4.8. So you're going to have to play around with that if you're planning to have late game exposure there and hope for a Bartholomew start. You could just bite the bullet and decide you're going to play Kashawn Bartholomew regardless, and if he starts or not, because I do think he's going to play 20-plus minutes, and sitting there at 3.8 against Cal is a great spot to look at for him. So he's probably one of my favorite value options on the slate at 3.8, and he makes a lot of things possible for the rest of your build. On the Cal side, I mentioned DeJuan Clayton is the best play for them at 4.8. He's just going to play most of the game. Cal's looking better without Devin Askew. It's actually hilarious because Askew has high pedigree from the high school level, and everywhere he's gone, he's just struggled, and they seem to play better without him. He had a really nice non-con season, and it was a fantasy option, averaging over 25 fantasy points per game. But without him, they've just looked like a totally different team, which, again, is totally hilarious, but I'm starting to feel bad for the kid. So DeJuan Clayton, that's your main play. Kwani's price has gone up. He has scored 20-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, which has caused this price increase. I like Kwani, but I don't want to pay 5.5 for him. I think we're kind of chasing those performances, and I just don't believe that they're going to continue. That Oregon front court is a little bit too tough for him. Grant Newell had a big game against my Huskies. Took a Herculean effort on the Huskies to not lose to Cal. Thank God they didn't. But Newell killed them, 10 for 18 on his field goal attempts, 10 rebounds, 21 points. He took 12 shots against WSU. Not quite as efficient there, only made 3. but the fact that he's taken 30 shots in 2 games is certainly eye-opening. So Grant Newell at 5.5 has to at least be in consideration because of all those heavy shots. And he's looking at 2 of his last 4 games over 30 fantasy points. He had 13 and 12 against Colorado back on December 31st. And then just recently against my Huskies, 21 and 10. So Grant Newell, they're going to need his size. They're going to need his ability to rebound and be able to check the other side for Oregon in N'Faly Dante, Kel Ware, and Nate Biddle. They have a lot of size there. So expect Newell to be forced to play a lot. 5.5s, maybe that weird price point where you can't quite afford it. And if he was 4.5, but it's going to keep enough people off of him to where I think he's at least interesting. His shot rate's 22%, shooting 30% from long range. He's not too terribly tall. He's like 6'8", 6'9", but he's got some weight behind him. He is a freshman. The fact that he's playing this well early on in his career tells me that he's going to be a really solid option for Cal if he doesn't transfer. And I think I want some GPP exposure to him against Oregon because I just don't think we have to trust the Ducks. As a Husky fan, you can take what I say with a grain of salt about Oregon. They suck. So that's the slate. We did it. Yay. Core-wise, let's talk about this. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. Value on this slate is not nearly as exciting as it was today, although it does exist. We do have some interesting options depending on how the starting lineup shake out and some of the injury situations shake out for various teams. Nebraska, Cal has some injuries. Providence, if Bynum can't go. So we're definitely going to have to monitor that. Florida has a bunch of value we can use. Louisville has some outrageous value you can possibly use. Virginia has some adequate value that you can use. Cal has some cheapies. Oregon has some cheapies. It exists. It's just not as exciting as it was today. I do feel like Sean Bartholomew at 3.8, if we can expect 20-plus minutes, has to be the priority value play and the main team viable value play. Out of all the rest of the value, if I had to pick one to not completely fall on his face, I think it's going to be him. So core-wise, we'll start with Keyshawn B. Feels bad, hate Oregon, but I'm going to roll with him at 3.8, looking healthy. And then Bryce Hopkins. If you don't want to pay that $9K price for Bryce Hopkins, then please play Ed Crosswell. Play one of them, if not both, but Hopkins has to be a core lock. Last time we were the only ones on Hop and everybody else faded. It was that St. John's game where we only had 23. Ended up having some other non-Hop lineups that really did well that day, but I would be happy if Hopkins went into this slate at sub 20% ownership. Extremely happy. And then the third member of our core, I was thinking about Jack Nunch here, one of the Xavier guys, but looking at the prices and the home matchup for Derek Walker of Nebraska at only 7.4, he's the third member of the core and will double as the posh play of the day. I'm not expecting any ownership on Derek Walker. I usually put guards or wings as my posh play of the day, but Derek Walker just has such a phenomenal usage rate, assist rate. They run the entire team and offense through him. He should be able to do some damage against this Ohio State team at home, especially with Gary out. Walker will not have the luxury of taking very many water breaks. They may have to even play him through any foul trouble if he gets any. Hopefully he just draws 2 quick ones on Zed Key, and he just continues to dominate like he did against Zach Edey and company in their last game. So Walker, posh play of the day, and in the core, obviously. Bryce Hopkins and Keyshawn Bartholomew, that's our 3-man core. Also super high on Trey Mitchell, Jamarius Burton. Those are 2 guys that I would love to be able to get into my lineup while still being able to find a way to get one of these Xavier guys in there as well. So we'll play around and see how it works out. Might have to play 2 values from that Oregon-Cal game, which is gross, but hey, as pricing gets tighter, we've got to make some sacrifices and try to outmaneuver people. We'll have the PrizePicks stuff up tomorrow morning like we did today. We'll also have props loaded up into the the betting tracker. It's getting late as well, so be sure to check that out. But that is the end of the show. Thank you, everyone, for the continued support. Lots of live viewers. I know a lot of you guys are on the East Coast watching me. It's 2 a.m. for you. Go get some sleep. Let's make lots of money tomorrow. Let's get another seat for Team FTN. Take care, guys. Thank you very much. I will see you guys on Friday.